Commissioner Barrios, Commissioner Carter,
Present.
Commissioner Doyle,
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Commissioner Hatch,
Hey, good afternoon. I'm here.
Commissioner Knight,
Here.
Commissioner Smith,
Good afternoon. I'm here.
Commissioner Tellez,
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Vice Chair Gray. She said that she would not be here today. And then Chair Stevens.
Here.
A
Hi,
quorum
this is
is
Commissioner
present.
Barrios. I'm here.
Thank you, Commissioner Barrios. A quorum is present, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. We'll move to the next slide. With that, as you are able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Let's go to the next slide. We want to thank everyone for attending today's meeting. Our agenda includes two major action items related to the Shirley Conroy Capital Equipment Grant Program and the future of the annual operating report. We'll also hear some updates and discuss upcoming events. But to start us out, first we'd ask our commissioners to introduce themselves. I'll start out by introduce myself, Phil Stevens in Tampa, Florida. I've been on the commission for several years now. I actually am termed out and waiting for the governor to make an appointment for my slot on the commission. So, but I have a son, 25-year-old son with cerebral palsy, and I'm a transportation engineer by profession. So the stars aligned, and I ended up on the commission here. So with that, let's go through. Commissioner Barrios, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Lillian Barris. I live in the Tallahassee area. I've been on the commission for a little over 2 years now. And I'm here trying to provide the perspective of a paratransit user. And so I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Barrios. Commissioner Carter.
Hi, everyone. Krista Carter with the Department of Elder Affairs. I've been with the commission since 2019, and I'm working with the commission to align the needs of seniors and transportation in the state.
Thank you, Commissioner Carter. Commissioner Doyle.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Robert Doyle, Director for the Division of Blind Services. This is my second meeting, so glad to be part of the commission here. And again, I've been serving 11 years here at the Division of Blind Services, 15 years in the vocational rehabilitation realm. And obviously, as I mentioned at our last meeting, that transportation is of utmost importance for our consumers. And so I'm happy to be a part of this commission to share and then also to advocate on behalf of our consumers.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. Commissioner Hatch.
Hey, good afternoon. Taylor Hatch. I have the honor of serving as the director for the Agency for Persons with Disabilities, and went through this a little bit last time, so I won't opine too much, but we have a very sacred honor of serving individuals with disabilities and their families, and we do so through a number of different ways, really trying to make sure that we help support the health and safety of the people that we serve, but also promote well-being and help our clients working with them to meet their goals. And again, we do that in a variety of different ways. And why we're so excited to be able to serve here is time and time again, one of those goals are related to either community integration, skills for independence, or employment. And inevitably, transportation is woven all throughout that as a supportive service to be able to do those things and thrive. And so really appreciate the body that's here and the opportunity to serve. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Hatch. Commissioner Knight.
Good afternoon. My name is Renee Knight. I'm Vice President of Community Services for Elder Source. I live in the Jacksonville area. I've been on the commission since 2019. and I have over 27 years experience working with seniors and senior programs. And my interest for being on the commission has always been seniors and their critical need for transportation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Knight. Commissioner Smith.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Yes, my name is Melissa Smith, and I'm here representing the Florida Department of Transportation, where our mission is to provide a safe statewide transportation system for all on that one. And as Chief of Modal Development here at the department, we take very important the mission of our transit providers as well too, and making sure that we can connect our modes together to ensure that efficient movement of people and goods across the state. And this is my second meeting for this one, and I am excited to continue on with the mission of this great body.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Tellez. Yeah, you may be muted, Commissioner Tellez.
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, hi. How is everyone? I reside in Miami-Dade County. I'm a registered nurse of over 40 years, and I've actually served on the board since 2016. I was employed and now retired from Baptist Health South Florida as an HR Director of Nurse Engagement and Retention. And I was excited during my time there to develop a program called Aspire to hire persons with disabilities. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Tellez. All right, with that, I think that's everyone that's present. Before we move into our agenda, let's go over some meeting rules. For those who are not speaking, we do ask that you mute your microphone or your cell phone, *6 on the cell phone, so that we don't get a lot of background noise, because there are a lot of folks on the call today that need to, want to hear what's going on. This is a public meeting and therefore operates under Florida's Government in the Sunshine Act. The meeting is being recorded, and all verbal, written, and text, including chat boxes, any kind of feedback will be logged into the meeting minutes. We remind and advise commissioners on the webinar to not communicate privately in any way, including the chat box, with any other board members to ensure that our discussions remain compliant within the Sunshine Act. For the public comments section, there we'll follow our usual format. The first public comment section is intended for agenda items only. Please remember that. So if you want to speak in the public comment section, the first one is for anything on the agenda. The second one, we welcome public comments on any topic during that second one, which comes later in the meeting. We have asked webinar participants or participants in general intending to speak to submit a public comment form prior to this meeting, which I know of that we have at least one. For members on the webinar today or on the phone, we'll walk through the different delivery methods so that everyone will have a chance to take advantage of the public comment period. So with that, we can go to the next slide. We will go into the first public comment segment. We'll call on speakers who submitted a public comment form directly to Director Darm prior to today's meeting. As mentioned, please limit your comments to in this first section to agenda items only. You are limited to 5 minutes per speaker. And if you would, please, when you introduce yourself, please indicate your name if you represent an organization and your county of residence. We'll give you a 1-minute warning when you're 4 minutes into your 5 minutes. With that, I am aware of one public comment form from Jerry Stickney from Hillsborough County. Jerry, are you on the call today?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Sure can.
All right, perfect. Good afternoon, commissioners and everyone. My public comment, what I wanted to discuss is the AOR and the study in the final report. A couple meetings ago when we discussed this and went through looking for agencies. And again, sorry, Hillsborough County Sunshine Line will represent the local CTC. We were part of the group that submitted and worked in the site. We uploaded over 84,000 records from our data for that process. And in that process, we determined and sent information over that discussed some of the challenges and concerns we had, not just with the personal data from individuals, but also the process in regard to the trip purposes, the items regarding the fixed route versus bus trips, a couple other items that we submitted over. And when we reviewed this final study and the final report, we noticed that some of those concerns and things weren't noted in the final report. So that was a little concerning. We want to make sure that it's captured in discussion. And I know as we work together for this, I would love to look forward and be part of the team to really discuss and go through these challenges and hit these concerns collectively. So if this is an update and proposal that does change, it's done effectively. And currently the way some of the processes fits, it seems that it could be very disaggregated in the process, that we're very time consuming of a requirement and almost unmanageable due to the large number of trips that we have for TD and the trips we do beyond the TD funds that we allocate for our county funding. So this is my public comment. I wanted to look and make sure that we can help and be part of the solution and notate these comments and concerns that they're addressed and talked about. So if this is something that shifts down the road, I'll make sure it's sustainable, it's feasible, and makes sense moving forward. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. Thanks for your comments. We're going to be talking about that study a little bit later on the agenda today. So, so thank you for that. Director Dorn, do we have any other comment request cards submitted in advance?
No, Mr. Chair, I've received no other requests.
Okay. So let's walk through anyone on the Teams call today wish to comment on an agenda item in this first public comment segment. Okay, anyone on the phone or dialing in any sort of way? Remember, you have to hit *6 to unmute. Anyone on the phone? Okay, with that, that ends the first public comment segment. Remember, you will have another opportunity. If you were late hitting the button or something, we'll circle back around. You can talk in the second public comment segment. With that, let's go to the next slide. We'll go to the approval of the minutes. We convened our business meeting on June 3rd of this year. The draft minutes were provided to commissioners in the CTD business meeting packet. Are there any questions or revisions needed before we move to approve the minutes? Commissioners, anything you saw that needs to be addressed? If not, I need a motion to approve the minutes.
This is Commissioner
Barrios.
Barrios. I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Barrios. Motion, Commissioner Doyle, second. Okay, thank you. With that, all those in favor of approving the minutes as provided, indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. The motion passes. So let's go to the next item on the agenda is to approve funding for capital equipment projects under the Shirley Conroy Grant Program for fiscal years 24-25. Assistant Executive Director Karen Somerset is going to provide an overview of the program and projects recommended for funding this year. Commissioners, newer commissioners, if you're not familiar with this program, this is a big part of what we do as a commission. So please dig in, ask questions. It's an important part to understand the mechanics of this program to help us provide capital equipment for folks in the state. So with that, Karen.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, commissioners. Just a little bit about the Shirley Conroy grant. The Department of Transportation transfers $1.4 million to the commission to award competitive grants to community transportation coordinators to purchase their capital equipment. And as the slide says, we released the applications back in March, and we received 20 applications requesting $2.6 million worth of equipment. We went through the applications. We met with the Department of Transportation staff to get their input. And we felt that the technology piece, the technology request, have priority. Over the past couple of years, we've given priorities to the purchase of vehicles due to the delay in the vehicles availability during COVID. But this year we felt that the technology request needed to be given some priority consideration. So as you see, we're recommending awarding 4 requests for scheduling software, 2 for the cameras or video recording on the vehicles, and then 1 request for computers. We also awarded 1 for the maintenance equipment, and then we also awarded some for the vehicle purchases. And I think if you want to go to the next slide, the list of the recommendations are there. And we can go through them if you'd like. Baker requested maintenance equipment as for their shop, 3,360. Bay is requesting software enhancements to their software program. It's a scheduling program for the riders to be able to call in and schedule trips and to be able to do eligibility. Columbia Hamilton.
Karen, sorry to interrupt, but could you, for the commissioners, to make sure everybody understands, what are the general criteria that makes an applicant eligible?
Community transportation coordinators are the only entities that can apply for the capital equipment. We focused on the rural areas in the state. A lot of the urban areas, because they have the fixed route services, they're eligible to apply for a lot of their capital equipment through federal grants. But the smaller areas aren't able to get those federal funds. So with the cooperation working with DOT, they felt that the commission would be a better place to be able to award those capital requests to the rural areas. We've taken the position that our CTCs, every county in the state has a rural component. And because our expectations of a CTC are to serve the entire service area, urban and rural, each CTC is eligible to apply. Does that address?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just talking about, just make sure everybody's on the same page. And then what are there limitations on the types of capital equipment we would consider as well? I mean, I know you mentioned software, but just for the benefit of the commissioners, general rules of engagement for the types of capital equipment.
It's not disposables, so it can't be for like office supplies or office furniture. It's things that would help sustain the system. We don't do capital improvements, so we don't approve any type of repairs or equipment installations or improvements in buildings or facilities. It's more for the type of things that would improve the level of service for the riders in the state. So that would be vehicles, some shop equipment that's not permanently affixed to a facility, software, cameras. I think that's basically been what we've approved in the past.
Okay, thank you. I just thought it would help to give a little bit of.
No, yeah, I think so too. Yes, sir. I appreciate that. Yes. Okay, so this is the recommended projects. We can go over them if you'd like, Chairman, or just.
Well, I would just maybe just open it up for questions. And that's why I wanted to give a little context to it so that the commissioners could ask questions. You can obviously see that the vehicle purchases, are pretty expensive in general. And then the other equipment ranges quite a bit as well. Some of the software packages can be a bit pricey, but commissioners, any questions about the recommended projects? And again, this was in coordination with the Florida Department of Transportation as well.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Hey, you may have said this, Karen, in your opening, but what were the guiding principles that drove the recommendations?
This year, the guiding principles were we were focusing on awarding technology requests. And then anything after that, we were considering the vehicles. The vehicles, we were looking at the ones that had in their request that had the oldest and the highest mileage.
Got it.
as vehicles
Okay.
for replacement. We did not do any vehicles for expansion of service. We only were able to fund vehicles for replacement of older vehicles.
And what's the mileage criteria that you typically use?
It would depend upon the type of vehicle. So like with the minivans, I think it's 5 years, 100,000 miles. But then when you go to the cutaways, it's depending upon which modification it is, it could be up to 200,000 miles. And I think it's 7 or 8 years.
Got it. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's set criteria, Commissioner, that we can provide to you that, for the different types of equipment as part of the program. And it's in coordination with the DOT. So we share their criteria for, replacement criteria, if you will.
And you see the vehicle costs are different depending upon the different types, but also depending upon the type of equipment, what make and model they request. But vehicles are generally purchased through this. DOT has a program where they do a statewide contract for vehicles, and they contract that through Cutter. Cutter manages that for them. So not only do they
Center
purchase
for
their
Urban Transportation Research.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, they not only provide the bid packages for our grants, but they also provide the bid packages for any of the funding that DOT provides grant recipients and to be able to buy their vehicles as well. So I guess my point is that each community transportation coordinator doesn't go out for a bid for vehicles. They're able to purchase their vehicles off of a state contract that already exists.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate the information.
Uh-huh.
Any other questions, Commissioners? Okay, with that, you're looking at, did you have anything else, Karen? I'm sorry. Any other?
No, sir, I didn't. We
Okay.
we are holding in reserve the vehicles. This is the price that was quoted this past year. They're anticipating an increase in the cost of vehicles. So as you can see, the recommendation is for 1.3. We're holding back some of the funding to be able to accommodate that price adjustment once we know the final price and what's in the contracts.
If there is a residual amount positive left over, what happens to that money?
Once all the grants are executed and the vehicles are purchased, if there's any funding that remains, it stays in our trust fund and is available, through the trust fund for redistribution in our grants program for next fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure everybody understood that. So it's not use it or lose it.
No.
So creating that reserve will just cover that because we want to provide what we're recommending. So we create the reserve so that we can do that. Safely do that and not promise someone a new minivan or cutaway and not be able to provide it. So, okay, thank you. With that, Commissioners, if there are no questions, I need a motion to approve funding for the recommended projects that was in your packet and is shown on the screen now.
This is Commissioner Tellez. I approve.
Thank you,
This is
Commissioner
Commissioner Carter. I second.
Thank you, Commissioner Carter. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. So the motion carries. Thank you, Karen, and everyone else who worked on the Shirley Conroy Capital Equipment's
Thank you, sir.
program there. So, all right, our last action item for today's meeting, we can go ahead and move to thank you, pertains to the Commission's annual operating report, also known as the AOR. As many of you know, the AOR is part of the statutory requirement for the Commission to collect and report performance data regarding the performance of the transportation disadvantages services throughout the state. For the last 2 years, the Commission has conducted a study to explore ways we can improve the accuracy and analysis of the data within the annual operating report. Thomas Howell Ferguson has historically been our consultant assisting the Commission with facilitating the study, and they presented their second report a few weeks ago, if you recall. Since we have new commissioners that recently joined us, Director Darm will provide a brief background on the AOR, Then Casey Perkins will present an overview of the study report on behalf of Thomas Howell Ferguson. And then Commissioner Darm will discuss recommendations and next steps. So with that, Director Darm, can you give us a background?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Next slide, please, Debbie. So I know this is going to be information that many of you know, but for the sake of our new board members, as well as some of our new audience members who may not be as familiar with this process. As the chair mentioned, we are required as an organization that's been a longstanding practice to collect, compile what available information is out there on the operations and services toward the transportation disadvantaged population. It's actually our first directive in 427.013, which is represented here on this top bullet on the slide. How we've accomplished this is through our community transportation coordinators each year. They provide us the annual operating report, AOR, on September 15th, and that is a compilation of the services that they have provided, as well as other services that might be reported to the CTC, which we refer to as coordination contractors. So example could be like a senior program or an ARC. That's kind of an addition. It's serving a segment of the TD population. All that data gets compiled, and that is a compilation of the previous fiscal year. So from July 1 through June 30th. Then in turn, once we the staff receive that data around September 15th, then we compile that, we validate it, and present it to you all as a board as part of our annual performance report at the end of the calendar year, which is published on January 1. Now, getting to the reason why we are here in this study. Back in 2020, so originally the AOR was actually not just a performance collection, but also, hold on one second. Can you all hear me okay? I just want to be sure I want to check because I'm seeing messages. And
Yeah, we can hear you fine. There's someone was saying they could not see the PowerPoint, but a few of us replied that we can see it. I can see it just fine, and I can hear you, so you're fine.
Okay, good. Yeah, just stop me if I fade out for some reason. So the reason why we were doing this study, or the impetus behind the study, was the AOR was not just a collection of performance data that we gave out each year, but also it was used as part of our funding methodology through the Trip and Equipment Grant up until 2021. So back in 2020, the legislature directed us to look at ways that we could basically revise that funding methodology. And as part of that study, we identified that there were some issues with the AOR data, particularly as two reasons. One was the data represents not just the trips and the miles that we, the commission, are paying for. These include trips also on Medicaid, APD, local government, and other programs, and coordination contractors, especially being entities that are kind of beyond our oversight. That raised some concerns about continuing that practice. The second reason why the AOR was raised as a concern was it was based on largely being an aggregated, summarized data set. We could not verify some of these numbers, and at least we couldn't verify it beyond trip totals. Whereas our invoice data, which is the data we collect directly under our grant, these are the trips that we are directly paying for, we have much more verifiable numbers like names of individuals, addresses, dates and times, mileage of those specific trips that we could use as part of the funding methodology. So as a result, the commission adopted a new funding methodology in 2021, but it left open this question about what happens to the AOR. So the AOR was taken out of the funding, but it was left in as a part of our requirement standing every year to collect data from the CTCs and report to you all as a board, as well as the governor and legislature. So that's kind of giving you a little bit more history as to what led to the study. So as a result, for the last 2 years, we have contracted with Thomas L. Ferguson. I would say that the first year of the study was really focusing on the why, which is why should we continue to do this? Is this important that we look at ways that we could improve or change this process, particularly as it relates to verifying the data and doing analysis of the coordinated services occurring across the state. And the study led to, in September, the commission approving a few recommendations to explore the collection of disaggregated data, meaning more detailed levels of data, similar to the way we do the invoice. So then the second year of this study, which we've just wrapped up, and I will turn over to Casey in a second here, looked at the feasibility, looked at the how. So think of the first year as the why and the second year as the how. How could we potentially do a disaggregated data? What would it look like on a concept and the feasibility of doing that? So from this point, we will turn it over to Casey, and then I'll get into going into the next steps for looking ahead. So with that, Casey, if you go ahead and share your screen.
All right. Do you see a PowerPoint?
Yeah, we do. It's just not in show mode, but I can see it all right. Is there a way to go to show mode on it, make it a little bit larger? There you go. There you go. Got it now. Thanks.
Got it? Show mode? Good.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. So, yeah, I'll take off from, what the executive director just said in terms of a detailed background with more of a high level background. And this is really getting at, what's the big idea behind the AOR? And I've really just got three big takeaways. They're also mentioned in the final report draft that you reviewed. But the biggest thing is, it's a data set. It's intended to be a trusted source of information, and it's intended to be used so that you can get a sense of Florida's TD systems, so you can analyze them, take insights from them. The other big thing is the primary audience for the AOR, it's state policymakers, and that includes the Florida legislature, it includes the governor's office, it includes staff, it also includes the commission, you itself. And third, and this is something David did mention, but the very first directive in the statute creating CTD tells them to compile all available information. That's really kind of the genesis of where this AOR comes from, in the annual performance report every year. So it was created by state policymakers in terms of this directive, the Florida legislature, and it's submitted to state policymakers, that is you, the commission. So jumping into the current AOR, looking at the current instructions right in the introduction, right after the first technical paragraph in this highlighted part here, you can see it really gets at that spirit. This is meant to be information that's used by CTD to inform them, make decisions even. And so that's right there at the top of the introduction. Once you move just past that part, there's a second big takeaway. And that is, this is information that's meant to be relied upon. So the integrity of this information, this data, it's subject to all kinds of things. So, in terms of the information that is submitted, there needs to be backup documentation. There needs to be backup held on record. It's also subject to audit. So two big takeaways. It's meant to be a trusted source of information, and then the integrity of that information is paramount. Looking at the structure of the current AOR, the way it's submitted currently, we break it down into 5 big buckets. So the first bucket, CTC organization, that's really just general information about the CTC. What's the CTC's name? What's their physical address? Who's a point of contact? Second bucket of information has to do with their coordinated system. So not just who is the CTC, but who are their transportation operator partners. And the third part, appropriately placed in the middle, is really the nucleus of this stuff. And this is where we get at the services provided to the TD population. What were the trips provided to the TD population? Fourth part and fifth part, they're really about resources employed in providing those services. So how many vehicles, how many drivers were used, and what were the sources for expenses and revenues. So, and the big takeaway here is that, that core component, the trip data, it's reported or submitted to you, the commission, in a highly summarized format. It's highly aggregated. And this presents challenges, which was something found in last year's study. This is a look at last year's purpose and objectives of last year's studies. It prevents challenges with respect to verifying the data, using the data for analysis, and that's why the study was actually, originated, was looking at ways to improve the accuracy and analysis of that data. So that study last year resulted in 3 recommendations, and we'll be focusing on the second one today. That's why it's highlighted. But just to go through all 3 real quick, the first recommendation was in 22-23, don't interrupt any of the existing processes for the AOR. Keep everything in place. No need to shake everything up just yet. The second one, though, was saying, okay, well, while you keep the current processes in place, do look at developing a plan to test run more disaggregated data, given the fact that with more disaggregated data, it enhances your ability to verify things and it enhances your ability to conduct deeper analyses, more types of analyses. And then the third part was just the legal aspect to that. As you do end up collecting more detailed data, there are privacy concerns and things like that. So you want to be sure of the authority to collect that data and also just kind of look at ways you can enhance the privacy anyway. But like I said, for this year's study, which we're going over today, and you had the final report draft, it's really looking at that second recommendation. And what we did is we went beyond just developing a plan to test run the collection of disaggregated data. We did an actual test run, and we did provide you an update at the last commission meeting. And so, as you'll recall, in the test run, and it was a bit of an iterative process. There was a beginning part, then there was a public workshop, then there was some more test running. But throughout all of the test running, 10 different counties participated at some point in the process, and their participation was very insightful, feedback very helpful. And this is something we always emphasize out of the gate on the test run. We did the test run through a site, and the site was built with multiple layers of security. And these are just a couple to start with. We'll actually get into some more, but right out of the gate, to go to the site where you submit your data, you had to have a special PIN just to access the site, because every CTC going to the site also had represented an individual county. There's a specific page for that county dedicated to them. And in order to access their county webpage, they also had to additionally have a password, which was something that we controlled and provided. So we looked at this on the last commission meeting, but I'm just going to put in a slide here to make up for some time today. But once they got through that password part on their county specific webpage, this is what they saw. Instructions on the left-hand side, submission on the right-hand side. And it really broke down into 4 or 5 buckets. 4 buckets if you did not have bus pass data, 4 or 5 buckets. Yeah, 4 buckets if you did not have bus pass data, 5 buckets if you did have bus pass data. But these buckets, they really aligned with the current structure of the AOR. Input general information, what's the name of the CTC, where is it located? The inventory and incidents, drivers, vehicles, also things like road calls and complaints, revenues and expenses. But the part we are really getting at as part of this study was that trip data. So instead of telling us the total annual trips you provided, we actually want to collect a record of every single individual trip. So in that bucket, instead of punching in a number, what they did was they attached a file. And in that file, it contained a record of every single trip. Think of, rows across horizontally. And for each trip, there are certain characteristics, think columns vertically. So first column had the date of the trip. Second column had the name of the passenger, et cetera, et cetera. So once they put in all that information and uploaded their data, they saw something like this. And we did our best to really reflect the current AOR county summary as much as we could. But what they saw was this, and you can kind of see it, I hope, on the 2023 numbers, they're kind of lightly shaded in gold. They had a chance to review the data that they actually submitted. So make sure the numbers checked out. And if anything looked wrong, they had the opportunity, just with the click of a button, to go back to that page I just showed you and resubmit their information over and over and over again until it looked right. And once it did look right, they also had the opportunity to really just print a copy of this for their own records, consistent with the current AOR instructions. Again, this is just for demonstration purposes, but they're able to download a PDF of this. So that's all the front end stuff. On the back end, once the data was uploaded, it went to a secure server hosted on our end. And we did not keep the data on the server. Once the data actually came in on the back end, we exported the data to a text file and then stored it offline. So data was not saved online on a server, but stored offline. So another layer of security. And just to be very thorough, we also took down the county specific web page once they were done uploading their data, once they were satisfied with what they'd uploaded. So, and then one more layer of security. As the data was uploaded, there was a process in place to automatically mask the names of the passengers in the data. Remember, the second column was passenger names. So John Doe, Jane Doe, what it did was instead of storing, those names, what it did was it would say passenger one, passenger two, all the unique names. And that was automatic. It didn't require any effort on the part of CTCs, and nobody on the back end, including us, was able to see the names. So at this point, I'm going to go to the site. And this is the site where they submitted their data, but what we've done additionally, and you saw one example at the last commission meeting with Citrus County, but we've provided a few more. They're also available at the site. Is we put together some example analyses of data that you're able to analyze at the disaggregated level. With the test run data we collected that's not possible under the current AOR. And I'm going to start with Hillsborough County. And while I'm on Hillsborough County, I do want to recognize, what they said in their public comment. They did provide feedback, and we can attach that as an appendix to the report, provide it to you in any other way. But they did provide feedback, and one of the big feedbacks, as I'm showing their number of trips by funding source, they made the point to us that going into their data and differentiating between CTD trips and other local government trips was a time-consuming process for them. Now, that's something that they see on their end. We don't see it on our end because we just see the data once it's submitted. But the data looked really good when they did submit it, I will say that. Very clean. These are how their trips broke down by funding source: elder affairs, local government, other, and then CTD trips. So they did identify the majority of their trips as CTD trips. Now, what you can't do with the current AOR is you can't drill into these numbers. You'll see something like total annual trips for the year, 53,000 for CTD. But what you can't do is say how many CTD trips were for a certain purpose. But with the disaggregated data, we're able to break down that 53,000 and see that, okay, the majority were for medical, just about half, I guess. Life sustain, they're also a big one, but 5 different trip purposes in all. So that's the first example of a drill down, a more granular analysis you can do with disaggregated data that you can't do under the current structure. For the second example, I'll use a different county. This is Glades County. I'm going to use them. They actually provide a lot of trips that cross county boundaries. So there's Glades County right there. Those are the total pickups and drop-offs taking place within Glades County. But you'll see they've got some in Okeechobee as well. They've actually got quite a bit in Hendry, quite a few in Leah as well. And I think if you add all these up, the majority of their trips, it gets pretty close, to being in other counties and not just Glades, being more or less equivalent. So that's that example. Then to go to the next one, I'll use Indian River. Time series data. The current AOR just provides annual totals once again. There's no sort of time series analysis that's currently possible with it. So what we look at here is, total number of trips by every single individual day. So this is very detailed. And I can say right here, okay, this day, November 3rd, 2022 had the most trips. It had 218 individual trips provided. In the current format, you can't even tell how many trips there are in all of November. No time series analysis that's possible. But now you can drill down on the individual day. So next example, I'm going to go to trips by the time of day. We'll take a look at Martin here. And you'll see that for them, the number of trips, whether it's pickup or drop off, oops, sorry, that the trips really spike in the middle of the day between really just about before noon. By far the most number of trips, 10 a.m., 11 a.m. in terms of drop offs, pickup, pretty similar story, 10 a.m., 11 a.m. by far the highest. Something you can visualize. So that's within individual days. We've aggregated it here, but not just individual days, but time of the day as well. Same kind of analysis below it, just a different way of visualizing it, but exact same analysis. 10 a.m., 11 a.m., most pickups, most drop-offs. Slightly more pickups earlier in the day, slightly more drop-offs later in the day. Then for the last one, I'm going to go back to citrus because I actually think they are the best example of this, but we did see this last commission meeting where this is the most granular analysis that's possible with the test run data we collected. There's 3 columns in the data set being used here, 3 variables. We're looking at the pickup time across horizontal axis. We're looking at the drop-off time, vertical axis, and we're plotting each individual trip by those characteristics. And then we're adding one more characteristics. You'll kind of see the color schematics here. So ambulatory requiring lift, that's a light blue color. Purple or darker blue, that's just ambulatory. Wheelchair trips, just green. So all of the analysis I just showed you, not possible under the current AOR. They were all possible. We were able to construct them with the test run data we collected because of its disaggregated format. So just to go back to the PowerPoint real quick and finish up. In terms of the report findings, in terms of a technical perspective from our end, the collected of disaggregated trips, we also collected bus pass data. It actually succeeded in all instances where we tested it. You know, there was never really a technical failure to collect any of the data. Now, there were a few scenarios where it took maybe 2 or 3 tries to collect the data. A lot of them, it only took 1 try, but from a technical perspective, there was nobody's data we were not able to collect because of technical failures or technical challenges. Now, like I said, again, in recognition of Hillsborough, they did provide feedback talking about how much work it was for them to go into their data themselves and really separate out the CTD trips from the local government other trips. And that's something that they see on their end. We don't see as much on our end. One little caveat to this, and this was a bit of an interesting find, there actually were some CTCs who volunteered, and when it came time to test run, they were unable to locate their actual disaggregated data. And this is actually despite the current AOI instructions, which require backup documentation, you know, pertaining or alluding to the source. And, you know, it's not to pick on them, but it does really raise this, you know, question or thing, something for y'all to think about, which is if down the road you do end up collecting the disaggregated data as part of the AOR, CTD then by default, like in a way, becomes you know, the record keeper of all this information. And so then there's a question of, you know, what else should be required of the CTCs in terms of record keeping at that point, because CTD itself will be holding on to the records. And then last thing, and this is something that we just demonstrated for you, but the collection of the disaggregated data in our test run, it did allow for deeper levels of verification and analysis. You saw the analyses. All of those analyses were built directly from individual records of trips. So a lot of the verification of the data is built in automatically into the process there. So big report findings. I'm kind of done with my presentation. Happy to take any questions or, you know, speak further, whatever.
I think Director Darm, Casey, is going to move to recommendations, and then we'll go to questions maybe.
Okay.
Thank you, Casey.
So,
Yeah, so if you want to go ahead and relinquish back to Debbie. I want to piggyback before I get in the recommendation, just one thing that Casey, going back to that point he made about the data that we would be, if we go forward with this approach and we have it, where there might be a challenge in the future where a system may not have or may struggle with finding, locating their disaggregated backup data. You know, where I could see that possibility down the road is also we have times where CTCs transfer over, meaning like another entity will take over the role of CTC for a county. We have one, for example, coming up that we voted on at the last meeting in Nassau County, where there will be a transition of entities from one to the other in October. So in concept, this would address potentially address that down the road if we had that data in-house. Say there's a transition of a CTC, then we would be able, as a staff, to be able to assist that new role when they're getting ready for their next upcoming report. One more slide back, Debbie, please, into the recommendation. Thank you. Okay, so real quick, where do we go from here? The study, as far as Thomas Howell's role, has completed as far as the feasibility. You saw the report. As far as action item for today, we've got two things that we still need that we've identified as far as next steps for this to be a reality, regardless of the decision today. Just to let you know, number one is that one of the recommendations at the first report was to have a comprehensive legal review of our options moving in towards this direction of a disaggregated data system. We have not really done the full comprehensive part of it. Now, we did look at our statutes. The thing is, our statute is very broad. It does not preclude us from collecting disaggregated data, but it also doesn't specify what kinds of data points should be considered as part of the collection. It's really left, in other words, up to the commission to make that judgment based on the way that the statute reads. I think where it's not going to be necessarily the question is not necessarily whether we have the statutory authority to go this direction. It's going to be more of the other concerns that were raised about protection of personal identifiable identifiable such as individual customer rider names, addresses, and making sure that those components are addressed as we move in this direction. So we would like to still continue that process of reviewing those legal options. The way I see probably the biggest component of a legal side of it would be if we do go this direction, having some kind of data sharing agreement that has provisions such as HIPAA, that just like we would with a fellow state agency we've done in the past, like we a few years ago did a pilot project with APD where we had a data sharing agreement and we were ensuring that there was a secure transfer of that information and it was being used for a specific purpose towards service. So so that would be the first issue that we need to address before this could be implemented fully. The second is if we go this direction, there would be probably a likely needing of funding or additional budget, should I say, to be more precise, within our technology side of things. So we would need software upgrades or any other technology components addressed. And as many of you know, our funding authority or budget authority comes from the legislature. So we would have to go through a legislative budget process and go through the legislative session this upcoming year if we do identify where there's additional costs associated with it. To be clear, we're not making a recommendation to add new data components. What I mean by that, but as in we're not adding new components than what is the backup data to the trips and miles that are reported in the aggregated sense. So we're not asking for new data points beyond what what we already have in the aggregated. So with these two considerations, legal review as well as identifying technology costs, the action item here for today is that for you as a commission to make a decision as to whether you give us basically the green light to move forward in a goal of implementing this. We are already in the current fiscal year, so we are not looking at this for the current AOR coming up on September 15th. We are going to look at this more towards the 25-26 fiscal year. So we could also, during this period, address these legal issues and the technology issues, go through the legislative process for that. But we want to be sure that the commission is giving us the approval to move forward with that before we start that legislative budget request process and getting in all these components. This is up for the commission to make a decision at the end of the day. Do you all want us to pursue this disaggregated data? So short answer to all of this is the recommendation is that the commission would approve us transitioning towards a disaggregated data collection, and that is of the specific trips, miles, and bus pass data in the AOR, with the two caveats that we complete a legal review, as well as addressing any technology needs and budget or cost-related issues there before it takes effect, with a goal of July 1, 2025. And with that, thank you all for your attention. I know it was a lot of information. Happy to answer questions from here.
Commissioners, any questions? David?
Hi, this is Commissioner Barrios. I do have a question.
Right.
So this data is to justify funding for the CTCs. That's correct?
Good question, Commissioner Barrios. This data is actually representing all the varying types of services, transportation services that are occurring in the state. So this is not just our funding. I believe this is what you're asking, but let me make sure I understand. So your question, I understand it to mean is this just our funding? It's not just our funding. It is also all the other trips, such as local government funded or Medicaid or any other programs that the CTCs either themselves work in or they have the data that they compile within the AOR.
Okay, and then I just have a quick follow-up question. So I know you said, you guys said, we're going to do legal review. Prior to legal review, should we maybe not consider whether or not certain data points are necessary, such as when the gentleman was doing his presentation and saying names could be blocked out? Are there certain other specific data points that just aren't necessary, right? And are probably problematic in terms of privacy?
That's another good question, Commissioner. I think that would be a bigger discussion to have as far as the data points. And another consideration to kind of take that further is we don't know, maybe there may be additional data points that we had not considered that as a board or even during the legislative session this upcoming year that we may need to consider down the road. Really, honestly, for this study, though, we have really focused it on what going towards disaggregated data, not necessarily a question of the specific data points, because I feel that could get sometimes we could get caught up in debating those specific data points and lose sight of the bigger picture, which is that, number one, we want to be sure that we can verify it better than what we can right now. And then number two is, can we analyze it? So some of those examples that Casey showed are ways that we could drill down with that disaggregated data to tell patterns and trends that we could not do under the current structure of an aggregated system.
Did that answer your question, Commissioner? If not, I saw Commissioner.
Yes, it did. It did. Thank you so much.
All right, Commissioner Doyle, I saw you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you so much for the presentation and for the information. So I just want to get clarity, and I might need to step away briefly as well. But what the staff is just asking for the commission's go ahead to explore this further for implementation, to give you all the green light that this is something that the commission is interested in for the staff to pursue, whether it be legislative changes, data sharing agreements, et cetera, and then just to proceed with the process. You'll certainly be able to bring things back to the commission if necessary, but you need the green light of whether or not we want to move forward with this initiative. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Commissioner Doyle. And David, I'll start the answer
Yes.
if you can add to it. But yeah, when we first started talking about, this meeting and the recommendations moving forward, we just need to get answers so that we can define that path forward, quite honestly, because the overall process that we're talking about here is to improve existing processes, get more detailed data, because we have to have that anyway. But the recommendation is purely focused on trying to figure out what the legal appropriate path is moving forward to get this further down the line, so we could look at next fiscal year doing some form of implementation or rollout, that sort of thing. So yeah, absolutely right, Commissioner Cole. It's just it's because we don't know what we don't know right now on the legal and other issues. So we're trying to, that's what the recommendation would be, to move forward with figuring that out, what we don't know.
So, Mr. Chair, just in the interest of having a discussion point, can we move that the proposal, just move that we authorize staff to move forward with the process of securing whether it's legislative proposals, whether it's HIPAA authorizations, working with legal with a goal of implementation of July 1.
Or at least next fiscal year. And I've got a recommended, motion, if you will, once we got to get through the questions and that, we can talk about it. And it's two parts to it. One is the legal part, and the other is the funding part of it. Because we're gonna, in order to host this and deal with the data, somebody's got to, we got to be able to fund that somehow. So that's the first part is figuring out the path forward legally, and then the second part is figuring out how does it get paid for, where it gets housed, all that kind of software, hardware type stuff that's got to be answered as well. But Commissioner Hatch, I saw that you has your hand raised. You have a question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for the overview and the presentation and for the hard work that's gone into this, both from Thomas L. Ferguson, the commission, and certainly the local groups as well. I really appreciate it. David, I think you mentioned this in particular, talking about the bigger picture. And I think that thinking and hearing the conversation, is this the most important effort to focus on based on client feedback? And you mentioned at the beginning of the presentation many of the factors that went into how we got here, right? And so I wonder if you could share a little bit more about that direct feedback that we have heard from writers of needing, more transparency and a greater lens into what's going on. I think the worst thing that we could do is, start with just more data collection and not know that this is the most important thing we're focused on based on feedback from the people that we're all working to serve. And so I know that you probably have some more context there that you could share. And so I wanted to ask that question, Chair and David, just to see if you could provide some context.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Hatch. Well, I don't think that as far as this, the specifics of this study, we did not necessarily get writer feedback, but I would say that where it's the bigger picture, to your point, we're trying to just forget for a moment the specifics of the disaggregated data, just looking at what the AOR serves as a role for us. We are a policymaking board. It is not just that we do funding. We have a trust fund. We purchase transportation services through the CTCs, that's one component, but there's a broader role that we play, which is to support the coordination of services for a broad population and identifying where there's gaps in services. So to your point about the riders, this data could help us understand what are the needs. So using Casey's example he talked about in the one of the analyses was looking at what trips are being paid for by another like local government versus what we're paying for versus what APD is paying for. Identifying the purposes, like I think we at the last commission meeting looked at Citrus County, where a lot of their reported numbers were showing that our TD funded trips were going to support nutritional needs in that county specifically, but their local government dollars were going towards supporting medical or other types of activities. Those kinds of conversations is what we want to aim for having in the future as a board and as discussions with the legislature and the governor's office, that they understand it's not just what the trust fund is paying for, but what the system as a whole is trying to do in the broad sense of serving the needs of our population. There's only so much that we can do as an organization, and our trust fund dollars, it can only go so far. But it's critical that we understand as policymakers and decision makers that how do these work all together in coordination towards the service of the needs of the population. So I don't know if does that help answer your question on the rider component?
It does. I think that thinking about this conversation and the last meeting that we had as well is, going back to the charge, the coordination, what does the end user expect, right? And getting to a place as a system where we're measuring outcomes and effectiveness versus widgets and compliance, right? We want to, the widgets and compliance is the floor, right? We want to do better for the people that we're all working to serve, right? And so I think thinking about, getting to one day being able to talk about what's the closed loop of that pickup or drop off. How long did the person have to wait? How long was the ride time? All of those different things that we know that, at least that we're hearing on our end, drive satisfaction, drive whether you can depend, on a transportation system to transport, are really, really critical. And I think ultimately, going back to the conversation we had last time, Mr. Chair, informed funding, right? Pay for performance. And so I think that when we're having this conversation, remembering the big picture is going to be really important, because if you're like me, you start talking about data and it gets exciting and you can run down a rabbit hole really, really quickly, right? And so making sure that we don't forget the why, that's directly informed by the people that we're all working to serve. And so I just wanted to share that broadly, thinking about moving forward to not get bogged down so much in this data collection versus that data set, and make sure that it is always in alignment with our why, which is what we're charged to do.
And this is Commissioner Barris. I'd just like to kind of tack on to that because I totally agree. And as many of you know, my background is public health. I'm a huge proponent of data, but I am coming at this from a different perspective. You're talking about policy improvement and such, and I'm all for that. But I'm also looking at it from a user point of view, that you're talking about my data. You're talking about my information and how much of my information you're going to collect. And I want to be sure that the why is a good one, right? Thank you.
Commissioner Hatch, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Hatch. Are you raising your hand again, or are you were you unraising your hand?
No, just user error. Thank you.
Oh, no, that's right. Who else we got? Hang on, let me figure this out here. Who else we got? Somebody else raising their hand. Commissioner Carter? Yep,
Carter.
okay. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. So I absolutely agree with Commissioner Hatch, and Barrios on making sure that we're not just collecting data to collect it, and that we are being mindful of the user's data that we are collecting. And I think that in our last meeting, we kind of discussed what that looks like. How generalized is it? Or, not sharing, or what's the word I'm looking for? Not pinpointing who the user is. But I also want to make a point that we get funding and we get the resources we need by having data. So in order to help our clients better, I think it's important that we figure out, we either A, approve this and move forward, and then figure out later what we can collect and how we need to collect it. Or B, we don't approve this, but then we're going to run into that issue of now we don't have what we need to help move us forward to get better services, better modes of transportation, more innovation, all the different things that we're striving to do. So while I 100% think, but not to put us in a stronghold to where we don't have what we need to get more when we need it.
Great, thank you. Any other commissioners? David, any other comments or?
No, Mr.
Congress?
Chair, I think we're good. This concludes all the points from our end.
Okay. All right. So the recommendation that we're presenting today is an action item. It is to approve moving forward to what we consider to be the next step in the process of collecting detailed trip data as part of the AOR, beginning in the Florida State fiscal year 25-26, with a couple of stipulations, which we've mentioned. One being that we do complete a comprehensive review of our legal actions and our authorities prior to the fiscal year 25-26 grant cycle to ensure the protection, which a lot of folks have mentioned, of personal identifiable information. I mean, it is, like you said, Commissioner, it's my information, and I don't necessarily want, that into everyone's hands. So to ensure the protection of that personal identifiable information, so collecting data without necessarily putting a face to it, if you will. But and then the second part of the moving forward, the next steps would be identify funding, technology resources needed to collect the data and beyond as part of the data. The action item today is to approve moving forward to the next step with those two stipulations: legal authorities, legal options and authorities, and figuring out how we're going to do it with the funding and technology resources and all those types of things. And again, this is next fiscal year that this would kick in, if you will, this next phase of the process. So that's the action item. That's what we would need a motion on to move forward with the AR study. So is there a commissioner willing to make that motion?
This is Commissioner Tellez. I'd like to make that motion.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second to move to the next phase?
This is Commissioner Carter. I move to second.
Thank you, Commissioner Carter. With that, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of moving forward with the recommendation, given the two stipulations stated about review of legal options and authorities and identification of funding and technology resources needed, indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, with that, the motion carried. So that concludes the action item for today's meeting. Director Darn will now present his executive director report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got 3 topics to cover. I will try to do this very briefly, but they are very important, especially for some of the audience members. We'll get in a minute here. I do want to give an update on the implementation of SB 1380. But first, next slide. I wanted to follow up on the discussion we had at the last commission meeting pertaining to the Innovative Service Development Grant. That was a very great discussion. I know very difficult decision that we presented you all, and I know you know new board members right in initiation on having to make a tough decision on the first meeting. But I was very pleased with really good discussions. Basically, to catch everybody up, we had a decision to make about staying within our budget for the projects that were being considered. We've only been given $3 million this year, so we had to make a tough call. The commission ended up deciding there was a question on the table about Lake County's proposal, and that on the table we had about 50% of their requested amount due to some of the challenges that they were having with being able to deliver services this year. We're very appreciative that Lake County was at the meeting and indicated that, based on their circumstances, it would be better if they didn't get the funding versus getting 50% of the funding to allow them some more time. The commission decided then to basically take that amount and redistribute that across the other projects. So this slide shows you the amounts, the final amounts based on that decision. And then the other question that came out of that meeting was ensuring, was there any other concerns about the other projects? Because we had to adjust those amounts based on both the evaluations as well as just the nature of having less funding this year. I'm very pleased to say that we have had no other concerns that came up after the meeting. We have actually been able to implement or to execute contracts with the projects that you see on this table. So this represents the final projects for the 24-25 fiscal year under the Innovative Service Development Grant. So one thing I would like to make note of before I move on to the next topic also is that we would like to, I mentioned this at the last meeting, is that we would like to discuss the ISD grant process before we move into the next year, because we obviously have, there's opportunity here to make improvements. So while that's fresh in our minds, just so you know, we would like to have that discussion sometime in the fall to be able to explore if there's any changes that we want to make before we go into the next application cycle. So that is still going to be on our agenda for a soon to be meeting. So with that, are there any questions about the ISD grant? Okay, next slide. So this is the big topic. I want to discuss an update on the specific provisions of SB 1380 regarding local government contracted paratransit services. So we talked about this, I think it was in March when we had sort of an overview of the bill. There were many components of this, one of which was the board members themselves changing over. So we're still in that process of transitioning. But for today's discussion, I really want to focus on sections 3 and 4 of the bill created the new 427.02 and .021, which pertains to transportation service providers that are under contract with local governments to deliver paratransit services to persons with disabilities. So based on this definition, both these sections have the same definition and applying to the same entities, basically. They have some different components, but in essence, what this entails, what we at the commission have determined that there's at least two groups that would fall under this definition. One are the transportation providers that are under contract with CTCs that are considered local government entities. So for those of you who are new, CTCs can be a variety of different types of organizations. They could be county government, they could be non-for-profit. We have a few that are for-profit, but for the purpose of this definition, based on the way it's written, this is really be more applied to the local government. So they could be county board of county commissioners or city municipalities that are filling the role of CTC specifically if they contract out their TD paratransit services. Remember that the TD definition, transportation disadvantage, includes persons with disabilities. So this would be one group that would be impacted by this requirement. And that does fall under our purview as a commission. The CTCs fall under the oversight of the commission in that role. But then there's another component, another group that we've identified that would be impacted, which relates to the public transit agencies, fixed route systems, which are considered quasi-local government or local government entities that operate those systems, that contract out with providers to do ADA complementary paratransit services. Again, for those who are new, ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, it's a federal law. It requires that transit fixed route systems, your fixed bus operations, if they offer those, they must provide what's called complementary paratransit services to persons with disabilities who cannot access that fixed route due to their, either it's because of a mental or a physical impairment that prevents them from using that fixed route. So those services would also be impacted here. So what we wanted to mention today is there's a couple of requirements. Now, I know Commissioner Hatch, you have your side of it on the APD end. So, you know, if you want to bring up, if there's anything you wanted to add on this from your side, from when we get to the commissioner reports, we are from our end, just to keep everybody up to speed. We are working with APD as a commission staff. We've also got FDOT. We appreciate Melissa Smith's team and also Cutter working with APD to assist on the requirement that deals with driver training. And that part would be required. The way that this is the provision in the bill says that the transportation service provider, so that's the entity that's under contract with the local government, must provide training to every paratransit driver that meets the requirements established by APD. So, and those requirements, it says in the bill, are relevant to the training and professional development that APD offers their providers for their clients. So we're working with APD on looking at the like what would be entailed with that curriculum, and then considerations about how we roll that out to be sure that the entities that are impacted by this would know about that. So we are working very closely on that front. There's also another requirement that I would like to speak more to from our end. That's the section 201, and that's pertaining to procedures dealing with reporting adverse incidents that occur on a paratransit service. So again, same definition here applying to, these are contracted providers that would be either under a CTC or under a fixed route system. If there's an adverse incident, the statute gives some flexibility. It's basically requiring the commission to just establish a model that could be used by these local systems. So it gives them flexibility and in terms of the specifics of the procedures, but it does have at least 3 components that have to be addressed within those procedures. That is that there has to be a periodic review of ongoing investigations and documentations of an outcome thereof. That means an outcome of what occurred during the investigation of an adverse incident. Number 2, the investigation must commence within 48 hours after the receipt of the report. And then third is there needs to be quarterly reporting mechanisms in place with the local government sending the commission basically a quarterly status of where they are with these investigations, the outcomes, those kinds of things. So the directive for us as an organization is to establish the model procedures. We are currently working on drafting that. I'm hoping that we can be able to release that information in the next few weeks with a chance for discussion. The way that it's written, it's the commission that establishes the model, but then in turn, it will be up to the local systems on how they incorporate that model based on their unique system. So I hope to have a discussion of that very shortly, but we are still in the process of developing those procedures, and that would also include defining what an adverse incident entails, because the statute doesn't clarify what that means. So it would be up to us as a commission to determine what those events, what those types of occurrences would be. So from our point of view, based on what some other statutes we looked at, this would really be dealing with the health and safety involving either a medical type of response or a law enforcement kind of situation. So we will give some examples in the procedures once we develop that. But I wanted to give you all a heads up that this is a moving target. It is moving quickly. We have an October 1 deadline for these provisions. So we are working as quickly as we can to help ensure that there is enough information for folks to meet the requirements and comply with these provisions. DOT also has another component I don't have in the slide here, but if Commissioner Smith wants to discuss it, it's just to let you all know that they have a report separate from these provisions they're doing a comprehensive assessment of our program and our system as a coordinated transportation disadvantage system. So there will be more work involved in that, and that report is due on January 1. So that will also be kind of looking ahead beyond these provisions, where our future goes, and potentially might lead to events that occur during the legislative cycle. So we are working very closely with DOT in that, and we will be contacting our CTCs just to be aware that they may be reaching out to you all for information to assess part of that assessment to be sure that they're addressing the objectives in that statute. So are there any questions of the update on the legislation? Okay, last thing real quick, one more slide. We have just some upcoming events to share with you all. One is we've got a orientation for our new board members, which everybody is invited. It is a public meeting that will be occurring on August 7th at 1 p.m. in Tallahassee. We should be getting that information out very shortly, including we will have a virtual option, but we do appreciate that our new board members especially make that in person if they can, because that will be a really important orientation of all the different components of our program, what your roles are as board members. And then we'll be talking about some upcoming priorities, obviously, one of which is the implementation, as I mentioned, of the legislation, but any other kinds of big action items that we're going to be anticipating over the next several months. Then we have our annual conference in September in West Palm Beach. We are partnering with the Florida Public Transportation Association this year on that. That will be on September 22nd to the 24th. And then we will have our next board meeting right after that in conjunction with that event. And then we also, I mentioned that the deadline regarding the contracted services is October 1. Just want to keep that on y'all's radar that we're working towards that. And then we have a commission meeting scheduled in December on 11th. Usually we have that meeting as a virtual meeting usually, and that largely consists of the approval of the annual performance report that we discussed as part of the AOR study. That would be an action item anticipated for that meeting. Not knowing, we anticipate that we're hoping that we'll have new board members sometime in the next few months. And so we're holding out instead of committing that to be virtual, because if there's a chance that that's a new meeting for new board members, we might want to have that again in person. We will, of course, want to have another orientation once those new board members are identified. So we're just keeping that open for now. But just to keep it on your radars, that is December 11th as it is scheduled right now. And then finally, the annual performance report is due on January 1. So those are some of the big dates for those of you, very busy schedules, I know, want to go ahead and lock in on your calendars. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think that concludes my executive director report, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, commissioners. Any questions, Director Darman, on any information he presented in his ED report?
Hi, this is Commissioner Barnes again. Just going back to the incident reporting requirement, I was just wondering, are there any other states that already have some kind of system in place that might be, like something we can follow or do something similar? Best practice kind of thing.
That's a good question, Commissioner Barrios. We hadn't looked at other states, but we did look at other state Florida programs, particularly in the health and human services arena, because that tends to be adverse incidents. We've seen more dealing with healthcare practitioners. What do they do when they're serving somebody who would, by accounts, basically have vulnerabilities where they're left into the care of a practitioner. Now, in this case, we're talking about drivers, so it's not that drivers would be necessarily responsible for providing a healthcare service. It's more of a human service, but we're looking at adverse incidents that are more relevant to what happens if the health and safety comes into question. So this would not necessarily be, at least so far, what we've been doing is we're not looking at this like just as a general complaint, like the services were delayed. That would be a different type of concern. I mean, it's still a concern, but it's not what we're looking at when we talk about adverse incidents is more relevant to a more severe case where somebody's health is in jeopardy or concern.
Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think that the biggest challenge is, believe it or not, it's going to be around defining what an incident is. Because, the FDA has categories of accidents, incidents, occurrences that all have definitions. And so trying to establish what's an incident probably will be a big part of that process there. So any other questions of Director Dar? Okay, with that, thank you, David, for that. Are any reports from commissioners at this point in time? Any commissioners want to report out? Hearing none, I did want to allow our legal counsel, Rochelle Munson, our general counsel, to introduce herself at this time and discuss attendance at an upcoming annual conference. So, Rochelle, are you on?
I am. Thank you, Chair Stevens. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Good afternoon, all. Just wanted to make a side note regarding the conference that's scheduled for September of this year. I've enjoyed attending previous conferences and would so enjoy the same this year. Just as a formality, though, I would just like to confirm with the commission that there is no objection with me attending. There's total transparency with respect to my role. And I think the attendance at the conferences are beneficial and also very informative, especially in my role as general counsel. So that is just a note I wanted to publicly make and have recorded at this meeting. If I can hear from the commission whether or not there is an objection or that there is no objection, I would love to prepare to travel accordingly.
Yeah. Okay, commissioners, thank you, Rochelle. Again, we found it valuable for you to be there, and I fully support it. But any concerns from any commissioner on our general counsel attending our upcoming annual conference?
Commissioner Barnes, there's no objection on my part.
Okay. Anyone have a commission, an objection or a concern, or otherwise, we'll be glad to have you there.
If that is if that's a statement, I appreciate that. I'll move forward. Yep. I would like to make one other side note. We are rolling into a new rulemaking season, the annual regulatory plan. For those who are familiar with this commission and perhaps are familiar with it just by their involvement with other agency work. I am preparing to work on that, and I just wanted to advise, because this body has already delegated authority for general review of those rules to be conducted by myself and the director, as well as the chair of this organization, Chair Stevens, at this time. I will move forward with that, and hopefully by our next official meeting, have a report to present that can be ratified by this body. If any of the commissioners in particular, or any other leadership of staff may have any suggestions as to rulemaking, of course, please feel free to contact me. I will also note that any rules that do not appear on the annual regulatory plan, as most of you may be well aware, does not inhibit or prohibit any rulemaking in the future. If it's not stated, it does not stop this commission from entering into a rulemaking process. And if it's listed, we may not get to it necessarily, but it's just a statement that we present to the governor's office as to rules we anticipate entering into rulemaking with. So I just wanted to clarify that. I know we have some new members. I can't wait for the new member training, so we can probably explain some of this in more detail as needed. And I do welcome all of you, but I needed to make that statement because I know I'll be moving forward prior to the next meeting, and hopefully by the next meeting be prepared to ratify. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. And for the new commissioners, Rochelle will prepare you a nightstand reading package of several thousand pages of Florida statutes that you have to memorize.
Will not.
So, okay, thank you. Well, before we conclude with public comments and closing remarks, we would like to make a special announcement. Today is Commissioner Knight's last meeting as a member of the commission. She's welcome to come back anytime, of course. Commissioner Knight joined the commission in September of 2019 and has represented and continues to represent the needs of seniors that are in the transportation disadvantaged community. She also brought forth her knowledge of the community transportation coordinator system because of her history with Clay County many years ago. Throughout her tenure on the board, Commissioner Knight has been dedicated and fair-minded about the issues that we have dealt with and confronted our program, ranging from the new funding formula, which got lots of energy put into it, responding to the aftermath of the pandemic. So she assisted us through the pandemic. And also served as a chair of several subcommittees here at the commission. We want to thank you, Commissioner Knight, for your service and to wish you best in whatever you're going to be spending your additional time on as you move forward. So just want to recognize Commissioner Renee Knight and tell her thank you. So you still there, Commissioner Knight?
I am, Chair Stevens, and thank you for that. And I would like to say it's been my honor to serve on the commission, and I wish the commission and commissioners all the best as you preserve the program mission and you continue to provide trips to our transportation disadvantaged citizens. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, let's move to our second public comment segment. You are welcome to discuss any topic you would like, not just related to the agenda. Again, we are going to limit speakers to 5 minutes. We will give you a 1-minute warning. Please indicate your name if you represent an organization and your county of residence. We'll work through the same format as the first public comment segment. Do we have any cards submitted in advance, Director Doyle?
No comment cards.
Okay.
Chair.
Okay. Anyone on the Teams meeting today wish to make a public comment? What about on the phone? Remember, you have to hit *6. Okay. With that, this concludes our business meeting today. We appreciate everyone who participated. We know it's hard to free up time, so we definitely appreciate the commissioners and other folks that took the time to engage today and be part of the process here. providing for the transportation disadvantaged community in the great state of Florida. We will be holding a meeting in Tallahassee on August 7th, beginning at 1 p.m. And that's orientation that includes an orientation to our new board members. That information will come out on where and those sorts of things as we move forward toward that date. Our next commission business meeting will be in West Palm on September 25th, right after the annual training conference, which is September 22nd through 24th. So stay tuned, keep your calendars updated. A lot of meetings coming up. Summer's busy, fall's even busier. So just coordinate with the commission if you need things. So with that, I need a motion to adjourn.
This is Commissioner Carter. I motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Commissioner Carter. May I have a second?
Second.
It was
Sorry,
Commissioner
Taylor Hatch.
Yes, thank you. I have a motion to take it. All those in favor adjourn, say aye.
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 Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? You can stay on the call. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.